Today, we have a very strong voice and a very strong attendance saying this must be our common voice. As humanity, as people of faith or non-faith, this must be what we say together. And we are happy also that many countries have taken this responsibility and followed up with the treaty. Yesterday, I convened a meeting of Korean and American church leaders to discuss how can we maintain our relationship with North Korea and the United States and South Korea in dialogue, in visits, in relationship, to build the relationship that can prevent that anybody could come into a situation of using nuclear weapons. It shows that we have to work together both to prevent any idea of using them, but also to prevent any preparation to use them. Together as civil societies, we have something to do, and this is a great encouragement to everybody in civil society working for peace. Congratulations. I look forward to the day when my government, my Norwegian government, also will sign the treaty.
Thank you very much. It's time to open up for questions from media, and I have many hands already. Let's begin with the man in white. And we have a micro, because we're also live streaming today.
Good afternoon, Jamie Keaton, Associated Press. Could you, some of the world powers, some of the nuclear powers, insist that, particularly with what's happening with North Korea right now, with its ballistic missile programs and its nuclear tests, that they argue that there is a need for a nuclear deterrent, that they need to maintain their nuclear arsenal. What do you say to that?
Thank you. First, I wouldn't call them nuclear powers because it implies that weapons of mass destruction brings power, which I don't agree with. The majority of the world does not have nuclear weapons, and I think they are the ones who show that it is possible. Nuclear weapons do not bring security and stability. We can see that right now. In fact, I think the people in North Korea or the United States or Japan or South Korea do not feel particularly safe, do not feel like it's stable. I think that they bring a lot of insecurity instead. Deterrence means threatening to indiscriminately slaughter hundreds of thousands of civilians in a few seconds. Nuclear weapons are meant to wipe out cities. That's what they're built to do. And that is an unacceptable thing to threaten with. It's something that violates humanitarian law, the laws of war that we have developed. And no state who is serious about humanitarian principles should be doing that kind of activities.
Thank you. Then I have 6, 8, 10. Let's begin with the man in blue here. And I will also invite journalists following us online to send an email to my team member, Santi Murphy. You will find all the information online on the front page of World Council of Churches website.
Thank you very much. Tom Miles from Reuters news agency. Beatrice, 2 days ago you tweeted, Donald Trump is a moron. Do you stand by that statement, and does it make nuclear war more or less likely? Thank you.
Well, this is very awkward now. That was obviously a joke based on the news reports that the Secretary of State had said those words in a meeting. So I was just trying to be funny, which I kind of regret now. But of course, I think that the election of President Donald Trump has made a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with the fact that he alone can authorize the use of nuclear weapons, and there's nothing people can do to stop him. A man that you can bait with a tweet, who seems to be taking rational decisions very quickly, and is sort of not listening to expertise, it just puts a spotlight on what nuclear weapons really mean. There are no right hands for the wrong weapons. So if you are uncomfortable with the idea of Donald Trump having nuclear weapons that he's able to launch, you're really uncomfortable with nuclear weapons in general. I think that's really the message that we want to come across. There's no one who we can trust with the ability to destroy the entire world.
Thanks. let's take the man next to the one who's speaking.
Yes, Jean-Miguel Chade from the south of São Paulo, Brazil. Also to Beatrice, what is then your take, or what is your suggestion on the crisis today between North Korea and the U.S.?
I think obviously threatening to use nuclear weapons to totally destroy an entire country with nuclear weapons, test of nuclear weapons and nuclear missiles, all these activities are completely unacceptable and also now illegal under this new treaty. North Korea and the United States should respect that, refrain from such behavior. I think diplomacy, negotiations have shown to be effective in these kind of situations. We've just seen that Iran is complying with the nuclear deal between Iran and others. Diplomacy is a very effective way, so I would urge those two states to engage in negotiations to come to a peaceful solution. But the long-term solution is, of course, to stop relying on nuclear weapons. As long as some countries find it acceptable to threaten to use nuclear weapons, to have nuclear weapons, to develop nuclear weapons, there will always be other states who want that as well. Our solution is to make it illegitimate to have them, to use them, to develop them. And to make it, to stigmatize and make sure that we remove the prestige from nuclear weapons.
Thanks. Then it's time for this table. I would go for a man in black and the blue lanyard. That's you. Okay, not John. You're second.
Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency. Beatrice, with this Peace Nobel Prize, do you expect to be more able to engage with the P5, and in what format? And when do you think it should reasonable to think that the new treaty will enter into force?
We hope that this treaty will provide space for dialogue between those states that have not yet signed this treaty. We will work very hard to make sure that as many states sign it as possible and ratify it. It will be entering into force when 50 states have ratified, with which we have a goal of the end of 2018 for that, just based on other disarmament treaties, how fast they usually happen. But we will also use this treaty to put pressure on those states that still say that they will never sign it. We have seen past examples of the treaties prohibiting other weapons, like chemical weapons, biological weapons, landmines, and cluster munitions, that these treaties do have an impact on policies and behavior on states not party to them, whether or not they like it. It does change things when the rest of the international community declares these weapons illegal. So we have great hopes, and we will spend no effort in using this treaty, using this prize, to really make an impact on the states that haven't signed the treaty. It will take time, but we will get there, I think.
What kind of engagement with them do you have?
I think this prize really rewards the entire campaign, all the organizations that work tirelessly around the world through parliamentary pressure, media work, public mobilization, inspiring a new generation who grew up after the Cold War to rethink how we see these weapons.
John?
Yes, good afternoon. Jan Habermann. I write for various media outlets in Germany and German-speaking countries. It's for you, Beatrice. First question, what was your initial reaction when you got the phone call from Oslo? And secondly, could you please elaborate a little bit more on your campaign? You were saying the power of the people, it's a grassroots campaign as far as I understand it. Could you please tell us a little bit more how you work, what are your channels, how do you approach politicians and all the rest of it? Thanks.
Well, first was just shocked. It was just a few minutes before the announcement that we got the phone call, and it's really hard to believe it at first. So we were a little bit worried that it was a prank, and couldn't really be that excited until we actually saw the live feed and heard our name being mentioned. And even then, I'm still not really sure I believe it. So obviously extremely excited and happy. a bit confused as to how do you handle these kind of things. It's not like we won a Nobel Peace Prize before. So it's, very, very excited. The campaign works in many different ways. We have everything from activists doing street actions, for example, to draw attention, to advocates who work very closely to parliamentarians and other decision makers. We work in the United Nations, we work locally, we work sort of on all aspects of what civil society engages with people and politicians. So it's there's a lot of work. We tweet a lot, not only about Donald Trump, but also other things. A lot of social media work, communications work, trying to explain to people what nuclear weapons are, what they would do to people if they were used, and that there is a possibility to change. We do not have to take this for granted. We do not have to just accept nuclear weapons. We can actually change things.
Thanks. Then we have one more question at this table. That's the lady in blue. Everyone is dressed in blue today. And then we will move to that table.
Hello, it's Christiana with the German press agency. What are you going to do with the prize money?
Well, we haven't gotten them yet, so no, I don't know. I mean, obviously, that is a discussion we have to have internally, also with ICAN's leadership, our steering group. But I would imagine that we will use it in the way we see best to strengthen the campaign, to ensure that as many states as possible sign on and become parties to this treaty, that the treaty creates a new norm, and that the norm has an impact on states outside the treaty.
Thanks. Then we will move to this table, the man in green. Santi.
Thanks. Good. I didn't dress in black today. Mark Engelhardt from the German Public Radio. Two questions. You answered it half, but anyway, how do you think this prize is going to change your campaign and the success of your campaign? Do you think it's going to convince states to join, which otherwise probably wouldn't have? And secondly, you could be based in New York or anywhere else in the world. You're based in Greater Geneva area. Could you tell us why here?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say already now how this will change campaigning, but obviously we've been pretty successful, I think. We got a treaty, and we only existed for 10 years. So I imagine that we will do just more of what we've been doing, having more authority, maybe get yes to more meetings now, I don't know. So I think we will continue in the way that we have before, but obviously this prize brings extra power to our messages, I think. Geneva is a really important place, the capital for a lot of disarmament issues, but also for humanitarian issues. We have great partners here in the United Nations, the ICRC, Actors Like World Council of Churches, and a lot of other partner organizations of ICAN are based here. It's a city where you can sort of both have the disarmament and the humanitarian part, which is sort of builds the whole basis for this treaty, that disarmament is because of a humanitarian imperative. We're not disarming because of strategic stability, but we're disarming because of the impact that weapons will have on civilians, on people. So I think Geneva is an excellent city for that. Also the Human Rights Council and things like that. So it's a great place to be working in.
Daniel?
Yeah, I think just to add to that as well, we've worked a lot over the last few years in multilateral diplomatic spheres to make this treaty happen. But we've always seen the treaty as a tool to kind of embolden civil society action back home. So I think one thing that you'll see us do, and Beatrice mentioned this, is to really bring the treaty back home to countries that are compliant with the nuclear weapons arrangements, umbrella countries, and we'll really work hard with parliamentarians to change the concrete policies in those countries. And through that work, we'll begin to make put a lot more pressure on the nuclear weapons states. It's not just the nuclear weapons states that are complicit in the nuclear weapons arrangements, it's also these umbrella countries. So we will be working very hard to put pressure on those countries internally to change their relationship with nuclear weapons.
Okay, Greta?
Just to add one point on that, one concrete impact that this support from the Nobel Committee will have I believe, is that it will be so much easier for us to get the attention of media. If you knew how hard we've worked over the past few years to get media's attention, to get media to cover the risks that nuclear weapons expose us to, and not just a narrative that comes from some suits from the P5 about security, balance and stability. If you knew how hard we worked, look at how many are here today. So that's a very concrete impact that will give us a lot of wind in our sails as we use this prize to do this next phase, getting as many countries as possible to sign as quickly as possible and start using this treaty to have real impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have a man in grey there.
Thank you. Stefan Bissard, Le Temps newspaper. Some states argue that the ban treaty that was adopted in New York in July in a way polarizes the international community, since nuclear powers and NATO members didn't participate in the conference. How do you see that, the nuclear non-proliferation treaty? How do you see that in the light of what of the prize, Nobel Prize?
I think it's not the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons that polarizes this issue, that divides us. It's nuclear weapons. This treaty has really put a spotlight on a very simple question: are nuclear weapons acceptable or not? And for a very long time, a lot of governments have felt very comfortable with claiming in public that they are in favor of nuclear disarmament, but they keep defending nuclear weapons and need to have them themselves. Others can't have them, but we need to have them because there might be threats in the future or something like that. So I think it's really this treaty and the process of negotiations have not caused any division. It has just exposed, perhaps, the inconsistent policies of some states. If you want to work for a world free of nuclear weapons, if you want to make sure that no new states get nuclear weapons, you need to be ready to reject nuclear weapons as well. And this treaty really demands that they walk the walk as well.
Thanks. Then we will move to the table in the center, the lady. I'll come back to you later. Don't worry.
Thank you. Lisa Schlein, Voice of America. I would like to ask you what you think of the nuclear arms treaty with Iran. Donald Trump doesn't seem to like it very much. And then I'm wondering, are you afraid that now that you have received this Nobel Peace Prize, that it might have the same fate as the Nobel Peace Prize had upon Mr. Obama when he received it? There was so much hope that he might be able to accomplish something, and unfortunately that hope never materialized.
I think that the Iran deal is really important, and it will be really, really unfortunate and a huge security risk for the world if that was ripped up, especially at a time when Iran is complying with the deal. So I think that that deal needs to remain and be supported. And I think that the work of civil society on nuclear disarmament has been going on since 1945, pretty much, and it will not stop. We will continue until all nuclear weapons are eliminated. I don't think that we can have unrealistic expectations that tomorrow all nuclear weapons will be gone. We know it will take time. We know it will take a lot of patience. But I think this is really a moment to be really inspired that it is possible to do something. We're getting this prize not because we say we will do something next time. We are getting this prize because we have achieved a really big step. The treaty is here. It was adopted in July. It opened for signature just a few weeks ago in New York. So I think that that's going to be the foundation which we build for more progress on.
Thanks. We will take a second question at that same table. The lady in green.
Thank you. Elizabeth Isakova from the Russian news agency RIA Novosti. Actually, it's a follow-up of the question of my colleague, because people already started complaining that you are not doing like you haven't done really anything special for the nuclear treaty. So people started questioning your Nobel Peace Prize. So the question is, like, why do you think you received this Nobel Peace Prize? The first one, and the second one is that I think the major goal is to ask North Korea to sign and ratify this new treaty. So how are you going to deal with this? How are you going to influence? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Well, I mean, I think it's impossible not to be criticized by someone in these days. We have a treaty, and we have worked really hard these last years to get states to reject nuclear weapons, to make a legally binding commitment to never under any circumstances use or possess or develop nuclear weapons. And we achieved that this summer. And now the work continues to get more states to sign and ratify. And so we were very excited about that. And we will continue to work, of course, to make sure that all the nuclear-armed states sign on to this treaty. We will make sure that while they don't, in the meantime, before they sign on to this treaty, it will still have an impact on their policies. And that goes for states that have just recently developed nuclear capabilities and those that did it the first.
Thanks for that. We will go back to that table. A man in blue, glasses.
Thank you. Frédéric Durand with NHK Japanese Public TV. You mentioned that a bit in your opening remarks, but could you elaborate a bit on the influence of the hibakusha for the whole campaign and maybe more widely of the Japanese peace movement? And then a second question, what would be your message today to these umbrella states that were mentioned also? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that the hibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, have been absolutely instrumental. They have worked tirelessly since 1945 to raise awareness of this issue, to tell their stories. And the humanitarian initiative that was started the work with this treaty was really based on their perspective. What happens when nuclear weapons are used? We talk a lot about what different presidents in different countries think and say and their calculations, but what happens to the people? And we need to judge a weapon's acceptability based on what it does when used, rather than people's theories about what it potentially could do or not do. So I think it's the hibakusha and also survivors of nuclear testing around the world have been not only a key partner of the campaign, but key actors in the process to negotiate this treaty. The treaty also has a really great legal obligation to provide assistance to victims of nuclear detonations and environmental remediation, which has never been done before in any nuclear weapons treaty, which is really meant to address the concerns of survivors and to help them afterwards. So that's obviously a big issue for the Japanese government, who still hasn't